I will hand it over to our speaker, Lydia Troja, the human sexuality educator from the Cuyahoga County Board of Developmental Disabilities.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to spend some time with you this morning talking about the importance of comprehensive sexuality education for children and teens on the autism spectrum. I've been a sexuality educator at the county board for going on 20 years. Prior to that, I worked in, I think it was like a lot of us that have been in the field for a while. I started out in direct care. I worked in residential. I was a QMRP, did some work in group homes, also in small institutions, and in the behavior treatment unit. The thing that came up in all of these areas, it didn't matter what position that I had, there always came up questions and concerns regarding sexual behavior and how best to address it. I think that having a dedicated position at the Cuyahoga County Board of Developmental Disabilities to address sexuality education means so much to the individuals that we provide services for. I am the only educator, but it shows that we have a commitment to helping our men and women, boys and girls understand about sexuality and their behavior. As far as direct education goes, I typically work with our adults, and I've worked with a lot of men and women who have gotten themselves into trouble because they just didn't have an understanding about what is okay and what's not okay, specific to sexual comments and behaviors. So I am forewarning you, this is going to be a presentation that does contain explicit content. And it's important that we as parents, providers, educators, teachers recognize that information regarding sexuality, comments, behavior, relationships is going to necessarily have to be explicit. It may be visual, it may need to be concrete in order for individuals on the spectrum to be able to understand it in a way that is usable for them. And the bottom line is it's how we explain this information, how we present this information is how they're going to learn to have skills to have a successful adult life and to stay out of trouble. So what do we need to know? I think it's important to recognize that there's a huge amount of confusion when it comes to sexuality education. I think that with most neurotypical teens and children, parents and teachers have a little bit of heart palpitations start to happen when they think about sexuality education. When as parents and teachers of students who are on the autism spectrum, it tends to be just out and out cardiac arrest because we don't know what to do. We don't know what to say. We don't know how to address it. And this is based on, in part, on some of the common myths and other misunderstandings that we have regarding children and individuals with developmental disabilities, including autism spectrum. We have to bring it down to, again, realizing that it's about the individual student. And it absolutely has to be a collaboration between the student, the parents, and the teachers or the educators. And what I'm going to talk about is a playlist approach to sexuality education that can be very, very much individualized and expanded upon. And the mantra is review, review, and review again. And I'll also talk about some special considerations when it comes to addressing some of these issues with children on the autism spectrum. So I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible. Sexuality is who we are, and sex is just something that we do. On occasion, we don't spend a lot of time doing it, and we can choose or choose not to. But we do get a lot of anxiety when it comes to thinking about sexuality education, sex education, and what that means. And that's because we tend to focus on sex, the behavior, that sex education is talking all about sex and the behavior and condom use. And that does get a bit concerning to us. How do we address that? What I would like to remind us all or bring up is that sexuality education has to do with our personality. It's who we are. Our sexuality is not only our personality, it's our gender identity, how we think of ourselves as boys, girls, men, and women. It's our self-esteem. It's our emotional development. How do we regulate? How do we understand social behavior? How do we interact? And it's much about pleasure. And when we think sexuality, we right away think about genital pleasure. But when we stop and think about sexuality and pleasure, think about all the things that we seek out for pleasure. There's art, there's music, there's food. We enjoy the smell, the taste. We enjoy watching shows about food. It's pleasurable to us. It's about fragrance, the colognes, the perfumes that we smell. It's about massages and spa days. We are human beings who enjoy pleasure. There's multi-billion-dollar industries devoted to making sure that we can seek out this pleasure. But we get a little bit anxious when we think about the pleasure that comes from our genitals. So we have to remember that we are all, our sexuality is all who we are, but it's also the basic physiology and biochemical reactions of the human sexual response. That's something that is part of being human, and it's something that occurs. We go through puberty at the same rates as typical students go through. The puberty happens whether we have a developmental disability, autism spectrum, or whether we're neurotypical individuals. So it does happen. While sex education does have to do with sex the behavior, we have to kind of think of it as like a yardstick. Sexuality education, when you think of it as a yardstick, sex the behavior is really the last 1 or 2 inches of it. Most of it has to do with acquiring skills about relationships, about social rules, about what's okay and what's not okay, about how to make good choices. And it's also about how we learn to protect ourselves and what and giving us some really functional skills to do that. It's important to recognize that sex and sexuality are important topics of discussion. We know that, but we also have to recognize that many of us would rather avoid than address these subjects. I often hear, oh, well, the dad will take care of that. Oh, the mom's going to have to take care of that. Or, somebody else is going to have to take care of talking about this. And what I try to stress is we all have the responsibility for trying to address this. And again, most sexuality education is about relationships. So from that standpoint, everyone who comes in contact with that child, with that teen, with that adult is a sexuality educator. Again, we tend to fear the sexuality education because we tend to focus on sex, the behavior, rather than on sexuality of the person. And of course, it does have to do with sex, the behavior. But it's important to know about the context of having sex with another person. It's important to know about the relationships and the social standards that are involved in that. Our own attitudes absolutely influence how we talk about sexuality with children and adolescents on the spectrum. I've talked with some parents that say, well, it's not a really big deal. So, if my 8-year-old really wants to go touch someone's hair, I just walk up and ask, is it okay if my 8-year-old touches your hair? And generally they say, oh, sure, that's okay. And I cringe a little bit because I always, think of that 8-year-old growing up to be an 18-year-old. And at 18 years old, strangers are not going to be that receptive of having an adult come up to touch their hair. So it's very important that parents recognize that their children will be growing up into adults. And it's important that they do learn some other ways of getting their needs met, of expressing themselves and understanding what's okay and what's not okay. Okay, children and teen, and the other thing we really have to remember that If we don't talk about this with our children, with our teens, they are being exposed to sexuality education on a daily basis. However, they may not be getting accurate information. And that's the thing that we have to remember. Some of these influences that they're getting from other areas, from the media, from the community, can create confusion and really a misunderstanding of what acceptable social behavior is. I pulled these images off of Google Images, and a lot of them are from regular television. They're not even from cable. But there's the family guy who's, cross-dressing along with the family and the child. There's the game show for picking a spouse. 2.5 Men, I just heard recently was finally going off the air after 10 years. But that was a show that was highly popular, that basically supported one guy getting lucky all the time without having any kind of relationships and poking fun at the brother who wasn't so lucky. There's the Victoria's Secret girls on parade, and what that means to somebody who is a concrete thinker is, oh, you're walking around in your underwear and that's a good thing. The information that comes from music videos, from there's not much I can say about Miley Cyrus. It's or Beyonce. These are very highly sexualized images that are being put out there, and our typical teens have issues with social media and YouTube and the information that they're getting from some of these influences and have difficulty coming to terms with it. Our kids that are on the autism spectrum, again, being very concrete, this can be problematic for them. Also, behavior is modeled all the time. Their peers are engaged in public displays of affection. But what happens is they see the actions going on, the behaviors going on, but they don't know the context of it. So yes, there are sweethearts walking down the hall holding hands, but they don't understand the context of that relationship, that those two people are in a relationship and they are both agreeing to that kind of contact. And friends do hug each other. They come upon one another and hug each other based on their relationships with one another, based on that comfort level, that both people have to want to agree to that kind of physical contact. And you can't just walk up to somebody, in a dance and twerking and walk up to that person. It has to be, again, based on the relationship. Or, think about the confusion about picking somebody up or kissing. Again, it's all within the context, and that's difficult for some of our kids who are on the autism spectrum to figure out, why can they do it, but why can't I do it? Why can't I walk up and do that? And that's because they need to understand about the relationships and the mutuality in types of touching. So the influences on children's and teens' attitudes about sexuality and sexual behavior are really the same whether they're on the spectrum or have other developmental disabilities or they're typical. It generally comes from family, culture, religion, and we have to admit that all families are different in their comfort level in addressing the subjects of sexuality with any of their children. What happens sometimes is families that do have a child on the spectrum tend to be maybe more protective of the child on the spectrum. And that's understood. Parents, as a parent, we want to protect our children, but sometimes protecting them can be actually keeping them away from getting information that can help them make some good choices. Friends and community at large, that's another huge area of influence on sexuality and sexual behavior. First off, I think most friends don't have a lot of good information. They're picking up the same kinds of information as their typical peers. But when it comes to kids that are on the spectrum, they may tend to be more segregated, and they may not have access to other role modeling friends that can give them some of that information. Plus, a lot of the information that comes to teens, preteens, is through groups of friends. Think of the girls that get together and are, working on putting on makeup, and how do you do that, and talking about boys, and the same with guys getting together and talking. Many times our children that are on the spectrum aren't included in those kinds of groups, and they're missing out on a huge piece of information, a huge piece of understanding of how the expectations are as they grow. Direct education. Every school district has their own way of providing sex education. That's a whole different topic of discussion, but I will tell you that typically sex education in schools, it focuses on sexual health. It's in health class, and it often isn't made available to individuals in special ed or who have autism spectrum. And there are some valid reasons. It may be too fast paced. It may be too embarrassing. The child may bring up questions that can cause, some ridicule by the other typical students. But opting out of that class isn't the way to go about it. It's opting out of that class and presenting that information in a way that the child or the children can understand. So again, I can understand if one format doesn't work, but there has to be another format that can be provided. Books and magazines are a huge influence on our belief system about our sexuality. Think about our body image, information that we get from that. And some of our folks don't read, or some of our children aren't good readers, but they're still getting information from magazines, from the pictures that they see. And as far as the media and technology, I kind of lump that all together. There's the TV, the cable, pay-per-view, there's DVDs, all the songs, performances, music, and there's all of the social networking that children growing up now have been exposed to. They don't know a life any other than being able to use cell phones and get on the internet. And there's all sorts of areas there that we as adults may not even know about. We may not know about what's on YouTube or Snapchat, what Snapchat is, or what video games there are. We may not know how easy it is to access pornography on the internet. And I will tell you, it is absolutely out there. It is very easy to stumble across it. And the internet is very helpful to us, because if we do stumble across a site that we are spending time on, they'll tell us, well, perhaps you like this site. How about checking out these sites? And that's how some of our kids who are on the general kinds of social networking sites can end up on pornographic sites. I will tell you, as a sexuality educator, I am not a fan of pornography for adults with autism spectrum disorder or with developmental disabilities, unless they clearly understand that that is a form of entertainment, that is not real life experiences, and it's to shock and awe. That's what pornography is about. And I try to explain it this way. Learning about how to have a sexual relationship by watching pornography is like learning how to drive by watching action movies. It's just unrealistic. Again, another point about pornography is typical children will start accessing pornography by the age of 12 and 13 online. So we have to be aware that children on the autism spectrum are probably also trying to access that information. And when they are getting those images in a very concrete way, it could be detrimental if that's where they're getting their sexuality education. So myths and misunderstandings. There are times where people will just say to me outright, well, why do we even have to address sexuality education? Because they're not going to have any interest in sex. They're asexual. And while I agree that there may be some individuals on the spectrum who are asexual or don't have any interest in it, that is not typical. Everybody has a different level of interest in sexuality, in sexual behavior. So if we reduce a child or a teen or an adult to being asexual, it takes away our responsibility to address education in this area in ways that they can understand. On the flip side, there's the myth that, oh my goodness, they're hypersexual. There must be something deviant about them because they're always masturbating or they're always doing this or they're always, trying to touch people. And again, when we reduce it to a deviance or there's something intrinsically wrong because of the spectrum disorder or the developmental disability, again, it takes away our responsibilities to address it, to teach the social rules that we all had to learn when it comes to our sexual feelings and our sexual behavior. One of the other myths is that they're exclusively heterosexual, that we don't think about LGBTQ when it comes to individuals with developmental disabilities. And we tend to focus on boyfriend-girlfriend relationships. That can be an issue for individuals who are LGBTQ and have autism and are saying, wait a minute, concrete boyfriend, girlfriend, no, I am more attracted to the same sex, or I'm more I'm attracted to both sexes. So that can be very off-putting for a teen who's on the spectrum. Most sexual abuse is committed by strangers. That, if we keep our children segregated and protected and away from strangers, they will not have to worry about sexual abuse, so we won't have to address sexuality education. And I will tell you that most sexual abuse is not committed by strangers. It is actually committed by people who have access and are known to the individuals. They are the van drivers, the neighbors, the providers, the teacher, the family member. So it's not the strangers that are coming in and scooping our kids away, but it is also strangers who can manipulate someone into believing that they are friends and that they can have these kinds of relationships. I also want to just, to stress that children and teens and adults who have developmental disabilities, including autism spectrum disorder, are at a risk of being sexually abused at a much higher rate than their typical peers. There's a lot of reasons for that. A lot of it is the power that the abusers have over boys, girls, men, and women who maybe don't understand social rules, they don't understand the relationships, the boundaries, what's okay and what's not okay. Because remember, we have to go back to the biochemistry of the sexual response. Touching of the genitals feels good. And if we don't have an understanding of what's okay and what's not okay, it can be easy for our kiddos to get abused. Men and boys aren't at risk, and actually they are at the same risk, if not higher. There tends to be more reports of boys and men on the spectrum disorder, on the autism spectrum and developmental disabilities being abused, because we tend to report that more. But they are also affected by abuse, sexual abuse, and being at risk. Oftentimes, if there is some sexual abuse that occurs, there's a tendency to think, well, they're not going to be affected by it. And again, it's a different level for each and every individual child, each and every individual teen, on how that is going to affect that person and how the abuse was perpetuated. But to just reduce it to say they're not going to be affected by it, so we aren't going to address it, we're not going to bring it up, isn't fair to the individuals. It doesn't give them the informed choice that they need to be able to assert themselves and say, no, I don't want to do this. Or, no, you know what? I don't want to do this because I can make friends other ways. That comes to the myth that individuals aren't capable of making decisions about their own sexuality, about their own sexual behavior, that they aren't capable of understanding it. And that, again, is based on the individual. It's based on the person. Some may not be capable of it. When we look at providing services to a wide range of students and individuals, there are some students and adults who are going to require 24/7 supports by other individuals, providers, to help maintain their health and safety. And they will never be able to participate in a sexual relationship with a partner because they won't understand the responsibilities and risks involved in it. But there are others who will be able to if they have that information presented in a way that they can understand. So with rights and responsibilities, I am a supporter of every individual, regardless of diagnosis, having the fundamental human right to sexual expression, period. It doesn't matter what the diagnosis is, what the extent of the diagnosis is, they have the human right to sexual expression. However, with those rights come responsibilities. So some individuals are never going to be able to understand and recognize the responsibilities associated with sexual contact with a partner, and masturbation may be their only sexual outlet. Understanding that, it's important to recognize that there may need to be some supports in the area of masturbation. We tend to think of this as just natural and it just happens and kids figure it out. Well, sometimes it does, but what we find with children on the autism spectrum is sometimes it's not that simple. And you have to think about what's going on. Think about the sensory input. Think about understanding time and place. There's a lot that goes on. They may not understand the sensations that are involved in sexual expression. So we have to address a lot of things: public, private, the just the basic hygiene that is involved with that. And we have to realize that there are individuals who are capable of understanding and making choices, but we have to present the information to them in a way that they can understand. And with our sexuality changes, and we learn, and we develop, and we learn new skills throughout our lives. So we are constantly learning, we're constantly getting information, we're constantly changing. And individuals on the spectrum do the same, and we have to continue to give them information as they grow into adults. But it all comes down to the individualized approach. We all know this, right? It's the student, the parent, and the teacher, the educator, the staff person, the provider. Every child is unique. Every child requires an individualized approach. But we can use the same strategies that have been shown to be effective in teaching other skills. We shouldn't separate sexuality education into this separate foreign kind of we don't know how to do this. How do we address this, when we can use those same kinds of effective teaching methods that we've used for other skills? So the parent, as a parent, I don't think any of us really want to acknowledge that our child is going to grow up and be a sexual person and have sex, but they are. And it's important to acknowledge that they are sexual, and their growing up is a healthy and natural part of our lives. That children with on the autism spectrum are going to grow up to be adults on the autism spectrum. And acknowledging that your child is going to need assistance with at least some aspects of sexuality, the person, the relationships, everything we've talked about, that self-esteem, the asserting themselves. They're going to need some assistance with that. Probably, I will say more than likely, I will say definitely more than their typical siblings will. And it's going to be ongoing. It's a lifelong process. It's not just the talk. Okay, we've done this once and we've talked about it, so it's over. It's going to have to be ongoing and consistently revised and revamped and reviewed. And parents, ask for some assistance. There are resources and supports available from professionals. 20 years ago, when I started to work with parents and teach individuals, there were very few programs out there. They were very expensive, they were difficult to come by, but now there is so much more focus being paid to the importance of addressing sexuality and everything included in that. And there's many, many resources that are available for free online. Typing in, Googling, autism and sexuality education, and you've got a lot of things. Now, some of the information is not as useful as others. I've, looked on YouTube, as much as YouTube can get us to places that are on the fringe of what we consider soft porn pornography. There also has a lot of good information on YouTube. So there's all sorts of assistance available out there. And there are various agencies and programs coming up with really good sexuality education. So the teacher or the professional, whoever that may be, it may be a nurse, a medical professional coming in contact with a child or a teen. We have to acknowledge the same thing, that this student is a sexual person, and this is the healthy and natural part of growing up. It's understanding that they're going to require access to accurate information in the way that they can best understand it, to help them develop the functional skills that are going to be required for successful transition into adult living. Because again, children are going to grow up to be adults on the autism spectrum, and it's going to be ongoing. Again, it's not just a class, so it's not just, okay, how are we going to do this class at this time? It's something that has to carry over from class, teacher to teacher. It shouldn't be something that has to start over all anew, all afresh with the next class or the next grade teacher that the student goes to. What we need to do is have this collaborative approach where you learn the framework, you're learning skills, and then you're expanding those skills as the student gets older. And the other thing that I'd like to stress with parents and teachers is that it's very important to think of what typical peers are experiencing at their particular age levels, and try to format your behavior expectations at those levels. It's important to, because as our children grow biologically, physiologically, it's important for them to start doing the same things, same types of things their peers do. It's important that they have friends that are their same aged peers. It's very important. Sometimes it's easier to say, oh, well, he's, Johnny, who's 16, is going to play with Jimmy, who's 8, because they have the same interests. I will tell you, it's not okay. It's important to start to look at, how do you make friendships with same-aged peers, especially in this current, our social environment. It's very, very difficult to think about sexual abuse and sexuality and sexual touching. And we don't want to place our children in a position where a behavior or an action may be misunderstood with a younger child. So when it comes to the child, I kind of think about this as spectrums within the spectrum, because we have to think of the individual child. I'm trying to, to visualize this. So there's, the spectrum. Where is that child? Is it closer to the severe range? Is it closer to the mild range? But within that, there's all those other, spectrums we have to look at. The speech and communication, the socialization, the intellectual capacity, sensory, behaviors, and all those other associated conditions. And every child, we have to look through this and see, how do we support this child in getting them the information that they need. I wish I could give an ABC or a cookie cutter way of addressing it, but there really isn't. So it depends on the child, and it also depends on their level of interest in interacting with other individuals. The quality of social interactions really come down to three factors. It's the level of interest that the child has, the level of avoidance the child demonstrates, and also the level of insight that child or teen has when it comes to interactions with others. So the level of interest, it's, there are some adolescents and young adults who are at that moderate to severe range of autism that generally show little or no interest in others. They may be unaware of their peers' presence. They may appear indifferent when their peers try to interact with them. Typically when the autism gets less severe, the level of interest goes up a little bit, it increases. And with these kiddos, the quality of the social interactions depends mostly on their level of avoidance and insight. What I mean by avoidance is, although they show some interest in having interactions with their peers, their social anxiety is so great that they avoid that kind of interaction or that kind of play just to keep the anxiety level down. So they may get very nervous. They may, just even the thought of approaching others or others approaching them, they may try to avoid this at all costs because they can't self-regulate that anxiety. And what it looks like to us is that, oh, they're avoiding it and they're just not interested in others. And that may not be the case at all. So it's important to make this, to try to figure out, is this an anxiety issue that they're trying to deal with, or is it truly a lack of genuine interest? Because if it is anxiety, we can treat the anxiety, we can address that, we can help that child or adolescent self-regulate, or with the help of other outside environmental regulations and supports, help that child interact with others if that's important to them. When there is that anxiety with interacting with others, it's the same aged peers that tend to create more of that anxiety. And interacting with younger individuals or older individuals, it's a little safer. So it's safer to approach somebody who's younger because they'll be less critical, they'll be more accepting of somebody who's older, and whether or not they have autism or not. So that's when we run into some issues with older teens playing quote unquote with younger children. And again, I highly stress and recommend that we find individuals that are same age that have the same interests, because it is just going to be less problematic in the long run. And older adults are also viewed as being much safer because we tend to pick up the slack when it comes to some of that social awkwardness that somebody may have. We're more understanding, we're more tolerant of it. So, these kids may tend to go for those younger children or for the older individuals because it's more comfortable for them. For those individuals who do want to interact with their peers, that's when the level of insight comes into play. So there's some kids who just want to talk with everyone. They want to interact with everyone, whether they're the same age peers, whether they're younger, they're older. They just want this interaction, but they end up being very clumsy about it. They're that in your face. They don't understand social cues. They don't understand the rules. They interrupt, all those things that we already know that cause issues with social interactions. And that can be the way they understand that can determine whether they're going to be successful in their social interactions with others. If they're simply just not aware of it and they don't understand that they're coming across as being rude, insulting, or boring, then they can benefit from some of those social skills, whether it's social stories or any number of other ways to learn about social cues, and having them understand, well, when this person is saying this, it's criticism, it's sarcasm, it's teasing. I always think about, if anybody's familiar with the Big Bang Theory, the Sheldon character, where there's the running joke is that he just doesn't understand sarcasm, and he has to check with his friends to say, okay, was that sarcasm or not? So it's a lot of checking, and it's a lot of really concrete, trying to explain what's what, and it may be ongoing. But the social skills and training and behavior modification techniques can help promote good social interactions with those individuals who have that insight. I will tell you that there are also some individuals who don't have that insight and just don't care. They just don't care. They don't care. Well, I don't care if they think I'm being rude or insulting. And those kiddos are more difficult to work with. And that's, I will admit to that. What I wanted to pull up is just when it comes to childhood sexual development, I pulled up some just typical behaviors that are exhibited as kids are growing up, typical sexual development, and also some of the common problem behaviors that keep getting reported about children on the autism spectrum. When we report these behaviors, it's their problems. Something is wrong. There's, oh my gosh, they're always touching the private body parts of themselves or their others. They're removing their clothes in public. They're masturbating in public areas. They're touching their genitals. They're talking about inappropriate, sexual subjects, obscene gestures, all these things, making inappropriate comments. Take a look at, just as a point of reference, take a look at some of the typical sexual behavior. Their typical kids rub their own genitals. They touch others on their genitals. They talk about sex. They want to play doctor with others. They are exhibitionists. They engage in talking about sex, typically with same-sex peers with others. So again, the children with autism aren't that different than typical kids when they're going through their sexual development, but they do need some support, and they need some concrete help with some of these behaviors. But we need to keep this in context, in mind, that it's not just a problem behavior because a child on the autism spectrum has it. All children, typical children, go through this. I take my guiding principle for sexuality education from the American Academy of Pediatrics Committee on Children with Disabilities. And that is, children and young adults on the autism spectrum should have names or the means for referring to their genitalia, have some concept of privacy, their own and others, know which things not to do in public that are acceptable to do in private, know that no one else is allowed to touch their private parts except for a specific reason or specific reasons, and know whom you can kiss, hug, and whom you greet in some other way. That's pretty basic. And it doesn't seem very scary, and it is a wonderful guiding principle on how we should address this information for our children. So what do we cover? We cover body parts and functions, social rules and behavior expectations, different types of relationships, and exploitation risk reduction skills. We used to call this sex abuse prevention. I don't refer to it as sex abuse prevention. They are skills to reduce the risk of exploitation, because I will tell you that individuals who want to exploit other individuals are very good at it. And they do it as though it's their job. What we have to do is give our kids the skills to recognize and be able to report, even if it's after the fact that something's happened, that they know is not okay. So how do we do this? How do we do this? Again, we're sexuality educators every moment of the day when we're interacting with individuals. We teach informally, in the moment. Something comes up. You see something on television. There's a conversation. There's some music on the radio. There is when you an interaction with another student or a friend or a teacher or another adult. If something comes up, it's in the moment that we can address it in a proactive, in a neutral way, without making the situation any worse than it is. We have to make sure that we don't overreact, especially when it comes to sexual comments or sexual behaviors, because that's only making the matters worse than they are. But again, teaching in the moment. It is also in planned teaching opportunities. And that's not just in a classroom. That's anytime there's a change or getting prepared for something, getting prepared for camp. Wow, you're going to camp. Here's some things, review some things that are going to be happening in camp, changing from one class to another, going to play at a friend's house, having a friend come over, practicing some of those social rules, talking about hygiene, getting dressed, getting ready for to participate in whatever it might be. We dress differently for different occasions. We act differently in different occasions. We talk about that. It's also the formal sexuality education classes. And these are more of what we think about when it comes to sexuality education. It's taught by a provider. There's usually pre and post tests. There's specific curriculum that is gone over. And these tend to be in classroom settings. But I would tell you that sexuality education can be done in classroom settings, dealing with social, personal, and other types of relationship skills about the social rules, behavior expectations. We don't have to call that sexuality education. As a matter of fact, when I talk with parents, I oftentimes say, what you're asking for is not sexuality education. It is sexuality education, but you don't have to ask for it that way. You can say, I need help with social skills. I'm working on boundaries with my son or daughter. I would like some help at school with this, so we can do it together. So it's consistent across environments. Because sometimes just saying I want sex education makes teachers uncomfortable. Makes them a little bit anxious. And teachers, you know what? When you're talking with parents, you have to realize that parents get a little bit anxious when you hear sexuality education. But when you talk about, we'd really like to work on some public-private issues, some boundary issues about social, personal. That is all sexuality education, but it's in the context of sexuality of the person, not specifically sex, the behavior. So the playlist. I like to think of the playlist as everybody's familiar with an iPod. We all have our iPods and we have our own different playlists on it. There's music on there that we listen to sometimes. Others, we continue to put different music on the iPod. We go back and listen to certain music when we are in the mood. We have a breakup song. We don't listen to that song unless we're going through a breakup, so we go back to that. And sexuality education for kids on the autism spectrum can be kind of looked at in this way, because it's going to be a playlist that's different for every student. The information is going to be different for every student. The information that we build on will be different. The need to go and review will be different for different students. But looking at it as a playlist and breaking it down that way is a good way to conceptualize it. But it's the playlist has to do about body parts, functions, social rules, and this, the exploitation and the risk reduction. So when we're talking about body parts and functions, the correct terminology and identification of private body parts is essential. And we have to realize that gives the ability to communicate to other individuals about what might be happening with their sexual health or with their genitals. And we have to remember that there's different kinds of sexual language that our kids may know. There's that formal, medical, and polite, but there's also the cute that we tend to feel a little bit more comfortable saying. And there's also the slang that may be a little shocking and like, oh my gosh, I don't know where my 12-year-old child learned these words. But we have to remember that they do learn them from their peers. They hear them in a lot of different places. So again, knowing those words and being aware of them is important. And also letting the person know that, yes, that may be a slang terminology, but a more polite word is, and fill in the blank. And I'm not there's a lot of push to that we constantly are referring to private body parts for our children by their correct terminology. And you know what? I'm fine with parents calling, referring to the private parts as private parts, as long as their kids know that they've got that there's other labels for it. This becomes important because if you don't have the proper terminology or a way of saying these are my private parts, these are my genitals, you can't. A person may not be able to report that something's happening. I will give you an example. There was a woman who had very limited verbal ability. She did carry a handbag that, over her shoulder. And she, for quite a long time, was talking about something being put in her pocketbook, putting it in her pocketbook. So staff would walk over, open up her handbag, look in, and there was nothing in there that shouldn't have been there. There was her ID, there was the money for her soda, whatever. And this would go on. As sometimes teachers and staff do get busy, they were busy, and she was again talking about something's in her pocketbook. And instead of going over and opening up the handbag, they said, "Show me your pocketbook." And she took her hands and placed them on her genitals. Her terminology for her genitals was pocketbook, and we didn't understand that. We didn't understand. So she had been trying to share with us that there was something happening that she knew shouldn't have been. Something was getting put in there that shouldn't have been, and we didn't understand. So it is vitally important that our students have that correct terminology. And it's important that they know they're functioning and what's going to happen. I always talk about this as the plumbing lesson, but we have to know how things work, especially when it's coming to puberty. And little boys get erections before puberty, but it tends to get very different at puberty because there's all of a sudden spontaneous erections with ejaculation. They need to know to expect this. They need to know that this is not urine. They're not peeing themselves. It's important to know. It's important to know how things work. It's important for girls going into puberty to know about hygiene, about menstrual periods, to know that it's coming. Sometimes with some girls, it takes a lot of preparation in order to get to the point where they may start feeling comfortable with the hygiene and products that are involved in menstruation. And getting to hygiene, it's important that our individuals know how to attend to their hygiene and be as independent as possible, because the more independent children, teens, and adults are, the less risk there is for sexual exploitation. That's the bottom line. The more they're able to take care of themselves and do so effectively, the better. And also the hygiene is an important part of social interactions. So, especially getting into puberty, how important it is to take care of hygiene and body odor, and, make sure that you understand what's public and private, that yes, you can do this in private, but you can't do it in public. It's okay to itch yourself on your privates and when you're in the bathroom, but it's not okay to do that in the middle of a classroom. So that's important. Health, our sexual health, we keep all parts of our bodies healthy, and that's important. It's also important that we send the message that our sexual parts of our bodies have to be healthy as well. And in order to stay healthy, there are times that a doctor will have to take a look at our private parts. And that's okay, because it's a good reason. It is a very good reason to, no one should touch us on our private parts unless there's a very good reason. And I bring this up because there is something called the Tanner scale that pediatricians use to gauge the biological progression of puberty. And that involves taking a look at the genitals. It may be a quick look, but it's still, they still need to gauge if that's progressing at a normal rate, if it's accelerated, and that's important. So it's for a good reason. And that message starts, it's like one of the initial messages. And some children are actually going to have to get more information about who can touch them on their private parts or not. And those are the individuals that may have sexual relationships that include sexual activity, mutual sexual touching, and that's down the line. So again, you start out with basics and you add to the playlist. And also sexual pleasure. Our sexual parts, our genitals are pleasurable. They give us sexual pleasure. It feels different when they're touched. It may feel good, or it may feel different to a kiddo who is having issues with sensory issues all the way around. We try to think of this as like, oh, it's just this wonderful feeling, but we have to acknowledge that some children may not recognize that as such a wonderful feeling, that those sensory inputs that they're getting. But if they are touching their private parts, that needs to be done in a private place. And there's the boundaries and responsibilities when it comes to public and private rules about their own private parts, about others' private parts, about talking, about showing, about touching. So that's, all, again, with the private parts and functions. Then the rules about behavior expectations. Again, we've covered a lot. All of these overlap. All of these topics overlap, and they have to overlap in order to get to that a good understanding of sexual risk exploitation, how to risk sexual exploitation. But it's the public and private. And we have to do this by identifying, first of all, by rooms that are private. Use pictures, use labels, whatever that child works for the child. Discuss what ensures privacy. Close the windows, close the doors so no one can see you when you're changing. Be consistent about knocking when entering the child's private space. And practice this with all family members. Start it as early as possible. If you haven't started it already, start it now. It's never too late to start. And using visual reminders, a door hanger. Talking about public, lots of people can come and go. We don't know who's going to come and go. And picture collages of public places can help reinforce this. Having a firm sense of understanding about public and private, and having teachers, parents, and other providers role model that and reinforce that is a consistent way to get that information across. And again, the rules about the private parts. They're covered by swimming suits. Those are the body parts that are covered by swimming suits. We don't show them in public. Nobody touches them unless there's a very good reason, and we don't touch anyone else's. And it's also important about body conversations. It's one thing to encourage our children. They're curious. We want them to ask questions, but it's identifying a safe person to talk to, that they can ask this person a question in private, and recognize it's not a topic for public conversation. So if there is a question about it, perhaps the Thanksgiving dinner is not the appropriate time to bring it up in conversation with mom, but perhaps waiting until Thanksgiving dinner is over and asking her in a private place to talk about that question. And it's okay to, teach in the moment and identify that. Jimmy, this is the time and place to talk about that, but let's talk about it after fill in the blank, or when we're in private. Okay, now we're in a private place. No one can hear us, and let's talk about this. So again, concrete, identifying it, reinforcing it, and doing it over and over again, that playlist over and over again. Social skills. The social scientists out there are just probably cringing when I break it down like this, but social skills are just doing the right thing in the right place at the right time with the right people. And this is something we all have to learn. We are not born with a little chip in our brain that tells us what to do and how to act. We all have learned this. Someone has taught all of us what's okay and what's not okay. And our students with on the autism spectrum also need this information. And using the same types of supports that are used to learn other things can be learned for social skills. Those are social stories, the sensory stories, the thinking stories for the folks that are in the more mild level. That I hate to refer to it as low functioning, high function, but the ones who are able to have some insight into that. They're available, but it's knowing what to do and who to do it with and understanding that. And it's absolutely important to understand about legal and illegal behavior when it comes to sexual comments and behaviors. Individuals who are on the spectrum can and do get in trouble with the law. They can and do spend time in jail, in prisons, because they have broken the law. And it is important that they clearly understand what's okay and what's not okay. They need to know what it's called, what to do if it happens to them, and what can happen if you do something to someone else. They are getting a lot of messages just from watching television or media or overhearing other people. Think about all of the information that's been in the news recently because of the year here in Cleveland anyway. It's been a year anniversary of the 3 women who were held captive. And there's a lot of conversations, a lot of terminology brought up. Those are things that kids need to understand what those words are, what that means. And it's the type of relationships. We have different types of relationships with different individuals, and we treat people differently based on that relationship. There's our family, our friends, acquaintances, teachers, providers, and strangers. We tend to focus on stranger danger and strangers are all bad, but the reality is strangers are not all bad. We are strangers to somebody. When we walk through a mall, we are strangers. That doesn't mean we're not bad people. It's just that other people don't know us, and they don't know we have their best intentions at heart. We don't know other people. We don't know what they want or who they are, or are they just acting nice without having good intentions towards us? So that's the thing about strangers. We shouldn't be afraid of them, but we shouldn't interact with them. We shouldn't trust them. We shouldn't talk to them unless it's in very, very basic ways, like a community helper at McDonald's. How are you? What would you like to eat? I'm fine. They don't care to know about you have got a stomach ache or you've got your period that day. You just say, I'm fine and I want a hamburger. But we don't get personal. We don't get to trust strangers. And our providers are providers. There are individuals who are providing services to our children. They're providing a specific support, and they change depending on their job. So we have to remember the providers are not friends. They are teachers, they are other care providers, and there needs to be a boundary when it comes to that. We also need to know who can and cannot have contact with the private parts. Again, this is starting to sound repetitive, and it should, because these are all interchanged. But we have to give this information in order to have our kids understand it in real life. The other thing that is vitally important is information about how to assert oneself, how to be heard, how to be able to understand that when I say something, somebody will listen. They will. I can change. They will hear me, and it's important because if you don't allow children to assert themselves in just basic things about what they want for dinner or where they want to go, they're not going to be able to assert themselves in relationships. They won't be able to insert themselves in unhealthy sexual relationships as adults if they can't assert themselves and they don't learn those skills. And it's important to know that there are healthy and unhealthy relationships, which have many, many different aspects, different qualities, which could be a day-long presentation. But basically, a healthy relationship makes us feel happy about ourselves, whereas unhealthy relationships make us feel unhappy or scared or worried. And it's important that information is presented. So when it comes to the exploitation risk reduction, all those things that we talked about are part of that. You can't have the risk reduction without this. And in addition to that, we have to know who to tell, reporting, what are safe people. And they need to clearly be identified in all environments, whether it's at home, whether it's at school. And one of the things that I want to also bring up, that children in foster care may have different foster providers throughout their childhood. And it's important that they clearly understand in each and every one of these homes who that safe person is, who they can talk to about it, who they can go to. And sometimes it has to be as concrete as writing down a name. So that's the way to do it, is to have this playlist that repeats these, comes back to the different messages when need be, and also expands the messages as needed, as the child grows and grows into more independence. And that's part of adolescence. That's part of growing into adulthood, is being more independent, being able to live in the community. And knowing this information, the social rules, the functions, the type of relations, how to reduce the risk of sexual abuse or being a perpetrator of abuse towards another, is important for healthy adult living. So special considerations, it's specific to individuals within the autism spectrum. We're aware that there's that social awareness, that awkwardness, not understanding social rules happens with our kids. And if you have that in just basic interactions and relationships, it's absolutely going to roll over into having errors in social judgment with sexual relationships and sexual behaviors. Because let's face it, you have to have some negotiation with another person when it comes to sex behavior. There has to be some sort of relationship. There has to be some negotiation. It's not all about me. It's about, how do I handle this relationship? And the errors in the social judgment they just lead to misunderstandings about what's public and private, what's okay to say and what's not okay to say, our sexual behavior and not. We think that, okay, this is understood. We get this, and we don't understand why some of our kids don't, but they may not, because they don't understand what it is to do something that may be offending somebody else. They're not offended by it, so why should anybody else be? And especially when it comes to sexual behavior, if it's considered a source of pleasure, that may override what other people are doing or saying or thinking about it. Hey, this feels good, and I'm going to do it. So, that is something that is a huge consideration. Plus, sometimes the behavior is a severe behavior, and it requires intensive behavior support. These are one of those ongoing behaviors that really are problematic, and they affect all environments. And they tend to be the ones that need the most help with a functional analysis of behavior, with very concrete information, looking at all of the possible effects that might be happening, looking at the sensory issues, just very intensive. And masturbation tends to be one of those behaviors that causes a lot of distress, that causes a lot of disturbance, because it's socially, we know that it's not appropriate in any time or place other than in a private bedroom or bathroom at home. But we have to remember, we have to put it in perspective. We have that biochemical and physiological sexual response when we or someone else touches our genitals. And we have to remember that there's a distinction. We tend to think about, as adults, the masturbation is all about sexual gratification. Well, it may be for sexual gratification, or it may not be. We have to make a distinction between masturbation and just plain old genital touching, sensory input. For an example, I was called in to consult about a young man who was masturbating all the time. That was a report. He masturbates, he attempts to masturbate all day, from the time he comes in to the time he leaves day program. We're constantly redirecting him. We're constantly saying, hands up, and he does it, and then right away he does it again. So again, looking at what's going on here. And I watched, and yes, he would, as soon as the hand dropped to near the genital area, there would be the hands up prompt, and he would bring his hands up because he learned that. Okay? He learned that. but he continued to try. What he didn't learn is, and we didn't learn, is how to listen to him tell us what's going on. So I said, okay, stop the prompting. Let's just see what happens. And what he was doing was, yes, he was touching his genitals. He was going there, but it was more of an adjustment, a readjustment, a movement. And they said, oh, see, now he's moving his legs around. Long story short, what it was this was a young man who wore adult Depends. Number one, he had sensory issues. Number two, it was how the Depends was put on and where he was positioned in it. It had nothing to do with masturbation. It had everything to do with the sensory input and trying to either adjust, to make a change, to feel better. And he was doing it in ways that we didn't understand, and we didn't allow him to tell us. So part of it is allowing us to hear what the person is trying to tell us, because all behaviors are communication, and we have to take the time to learn that, to learn what that individual is trying to tell us. So it's not necessarily masturbation. And that genital touching may not have anything to do with a pleasurable or touch, and maybe because it's actually something wrong, an infection, a yeast infection, a urinary tract infection. There may be something wrong. And that's a communication. What's going on here? We can't just reduce it right away to, oh, well, he's, hitting puberty, or he's an adult now, or she's an adult and she's doing that. It's also a means to reduce anxiety, to relieve frustration, to provide a means of comfort, or just plain old sensory self-stimulation. Now, you guys can't see me, but I'm doing a lot of moving my foot. I'm doing a lot of socially appropriate self-stim. But self-stimulation of the genitals can also occur. And we have to keep that in mind for some of our folks that have a lot of sensory issues. So there's a lot of things that touching our genitals can do for us. I mean, even for the comfort, when children and toddlers or adults are falling asleep, they may tend to put their hands near their genitals. Many times when people are in comas, their family members are alerted by the hospital staff to not be alarmed that their loved one may start to touch their genitals as they're coming out of the coma. They're looking for comfort. They're looking for sensory. So we have to remember that that's just part of the human response. And it can be a behavior to reduce boredom. If you're not engaging your students or your young adults in something that's meaningful and they are enjoying, they can find something that they enjoy more than just sitting there doing nothing. So another thing is that the behavior can serve as a secondary function of gaining attention or escaping and avoiding a situation. It's so easy for our students to learn, like, oh, wait a minute, I did this. I didn't do it to get out of doing this task, but it worked. So let me do it again. Or wait, I'm bored, but if I do this, my mom or my staff is going to come my teaching staff is going to come right over right away. So we have to realize that it can take on other functions. And we have to be aware of the medical issues that can occur with masturbation or be the cause of it, the sensory issues, and also the medical side effects of medications, the medication side effects. Think about some of the medications that our young people are on, and they should be on them based on their doctor's recommendation to help with whatever their particular situation is. But remember, with many of those medications, there are sexual side effects. So if a young adult who all of a sudden is maybe masturbating more often, doesn't seem to be being successful, there's issues, there may be some more self-touching that's more self-injurious. Has there been a medication change? Could that medication be causing a sexual side effect? Maybe things aren't working the way they used to work. They're not as easy anymore. So it's important to keep that in mind, that there are medication side effects. The other areas of support for our boys and girls on the spectrum is the bathroom etiquette. I can't tell you how important that is when going into public, and especially in adult programming. there is specific bathroom etiquette for men and women. Now, girls, when they and women, when they go in the bathroom, there may be more chit-chatting. There's comments, oh, I like your hair, whatever. They talk when they're in stalls. They absolutely lock the stall doors, but they don't ask very personal questions, and that's important to understand what's okay and what's not okay. When boys and men go into urinals, it's a whole different ballgame. There's a whole strategy of which urinal you use. There is no discussion. There is no looking over. There's no conversations. There's actually on the, do a Google search, there are teaching programs on bathroom etiquette, how to go about using urinals. It's, it's something that is important, because if you don't follow those rules, it only causes more harm than good. You could be just bullied in there. You could be taken advantage of. It's important to know the social rules. And it's also important for our kids to know the what ifs. It needs to be concrete. What if I get an erection in public? What do I do? What if I want to touch my private parts and I'm in a public place? What can I do? These are things that come up, that they need a script. They need, based on their level, they need to know what to do. Oh my gosh, my genitals itch during class. What do you mean I just can't scratch them? What do I do instead? What do I do if I get my period in school? I need to change my pad, but I don't have one. What if somebody touches on private parts? These are all areas, the what ifs. They need a script. They need to understand, and it needs to be concrete. So touching and boundaries, again, are also very important. So the resources, again, we tend to think that sexuality education has to be some separate mythical kind of specialized program that only highly trained individuals can provide. It's not. Most sexuality education has to do with those social skills. It's about rules. It's about relationships. And there are many, many more resources available out there. Some of the ones that are out there are some, I just pulled these off the internet. There's the social skills picture book, where it actually shows scenarios of, do this, don't do this, do this instead. There's something called a 5 is against the law, which is very basic and concrete about using a 5-point scale about what's okay and what's not okay and what can get you in trouble with the law. Even if you don't understand it, it's like, you just can't do it. Because some of our men and women may not be maybe understand the whys of it, but they can understand that this is the consequence of it. And also not looking just at resources for kids with autism, it's also looking at others. There's the Teaching Children with Down Syndrome about their bodies, boundaries, and sexuality is for meant for kids with Down syndrome. But there's so many great resources in there and illustrations that you look at. It's important to look for other kinds of resources as well. When teaching about boundaries, looking at the circles concepts, and everybody's got a little bit different about who you can touch and how, who you can, who's your friend and who's not, how to interact. So making these very, very personalized and getting the child involved in them is an important way to go. Also, just more visual kinds of things is teaching kids that are growing up and changing the different expectations is using a life book, using examples of you did this when you were a child, but you learned this, and as you grow, you're going to learn this, and you're going to change. Even using family members. When mommy was a little girl, here's pictures of when I was a little girl, and these are, I grew up to be a teenager and then a young adult, and some of the changes that went along with that. So again, very visual to help individuals grow into adulthood. And they can be very specific and tailored to the individual. Again, here's some more. My privates are covered by my underwear, and there's a whole social story about that. And these can be individualized for the specific student. So the closing thought is children on the autism spectrum grow up to be adults on the autism spectrum. And the more they're able to manage the sexual behaviors in a way that is acceptable socially, the greater access that they're going to have to vocational, to social, and educational opportunities. And the more likely they're going to be involved in situations that, and if they don't have this information, it's more likely they will be involved in some negative consequences, some legal issues, some loneliness, some really unhealthy relationships. So it's important to have accurate information, how to handle sexual feelings and behaviors. And parents and professionals working together now can explore the most effective interventions for the adolescents in appropriate behavior and make a really significant difference in the level of the success that a child experiences as an adult. I want to thank you for listening to my thoughts and my feelings and my professional opinions about sexuality education and the need for comprehensive sexuality education, especially for kids on the autism spectrum disorder. And I understand that this time is a time for questions and answers. Thank you.